Boundless Authenticity Podcast.
The following story is strictly for entertainment purposes only and is a fictional tale. However, please do pay attention to the moral at the end. It began on a quiet night in a remote air traffic tower. Routine, still, just a regular night shift. A familiar rhythm of screams and distant voices until a single unexplained blip appeared on a radar. No transponder, no identification, no flight plan. It dropped from the stratosphere to ground level in less than a second. No sound, no disturbance, just motion that defied physics. A report was filed, the response came quickly, log it as a weather anomaly. But it came back the next night, and the next night, and the next, always at the same time, always in the same place. The pattern couldn't be denied, so the observer did what most don't. He paid attention. Logs were kept, footage recorded, theories quietly dismissed in favor of the unexplainable, and on the sixth night, the object landed silent and seamless in a nearby field. There was no fear, only gravity. It wasn't a craft, more like an idea made visible. Smooth, pulsing, shifting, in ways the eye could follow, but the mind couldn't name. It opened. Inside, no controls, no walls, just stillness and a transmission, not through sound, but thought. A map of Earth marked with thousands of blinking points. Contact attempted. Images of human fear, dismissal, ridicule. A single word echoed across languages. Listen. It wasn't a demand, it was a plea. The observer left changed, not taken, not harmed, just certain. The data was released, footage, logs, testimony, all handed to the world with trembling honesty. The response was swift, not belief, but erasure. Labeled a hoax, a mental breakdown, footage flagged as AI, credentials revoked, a smear campaign crafted with surgical precision. The final public appearance was on a low-rated broadcast, and the host asked mockingly, "If this is all true, why are you the only one who saw it?" The response came without hesitation. "I'm not. I'm just the only one who didn't pretend I didn't." That night, the observer disappeared. No evidence of foul play, no personal effects left behind, just a chair facing a window and a blank sky that no one dared to look into anymore. Years later, the original radar files were quietly discovered by a junior technician buried in a decommissioned server, fully intact, unaltered. They were brought to a supervisor. He read them silently and deleted them without a word. The moral of this story is, denial doesn't erase the truth. It only buries the ones who try to speak it. Thanks for tuning in to the Boundless Authenticity Podcast. Episodes are available weekly via Spreaker, Spotify, Apple, and pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. Video content can also be found by following Boundless Authenticity on Rumble. As you may know, YouTube does not like me at all. My guest today is James Gilliland, and James is dedicated to the awakening and healing of humanity and the earth, body, mind, and spirit. He's a best-selling author, international speaker, and founder of ECETI Enlightened Contact with ExtraTerrestrial Intelligence. He has had 2 near-death experiences and studied with the elders and masters around the world. How's it going, James?
Great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, and it's an honor to talk with you because I know that you have had so much experience and I have heard you speak before. You have a lot of profound insight on this particular subject. And I'm just wondering how you even got started with all of this.
Yeah, it started at a very early age when I was about 5 years old. I was actually dying in the hospital. I had bronchial pneumonia, and the doctors would tell my parents, "We don't think he's going to make it through the night." And this woman kept appearing to me, and she's all dressed in blue, and she would talk to me and stroke my head, and then I'd pull out of it. And then the last time she appeared to me, she gave me this substance and told me to eat it. And it was like the consistency of ice cream, but it wasn't cold. And then I ate it, and I was never sick after that. And later on, I know some scientists, some biophysicists, and we figured out what it is. But it was like a crystallized oxygen, a form of crystallized oxygen. And And so that was my first experience. And I turned out later, it turned out to be Mother Mary. And so as a disclaimer, I'm not Catholic, and neither is she. Basically, she's a universal being. She's here for everyone. And people try to contain and own the masters, and unfortunately, and they kind of screw up their messages. But the second experience was another. I was a drowning, and I went through the tunnel of light, and I ended up in the plane of bliss. People call it being held in the arms of the Creator or whatever, and it's a pure golden white light, and it's just the love and the bliss and the serenity you feel is beyond words. And I had a conversation with it, and I asked, the first thing I asked was, how can I stay? And the voice came back to me. I never told one of my children when to come or go. That's free will. And then later I said, how can I earn the right to stay? And it said, you can't earn what is given freely and unconditionally. And I go, wait a second, this isn't the God I was told about. I was waiting for the wrathful God, with the notebook and taking notes and going to punish all the bad doobies and all that whole nonsense. And that went away pretty quickly. And then I said, how can I serve? How can I give back? Because you're so grateful when you experience that energy. And it came back to me, and it said, what do you want to do? What brings you joy? And I thought about it. I said, I really want to come back and teach people about the true nature of God, that it's not this jealous, wrathful, controlling, genocidal God of the Old Testament. And it's not, that it's beyond that. And so later on, that created a journey, studying with lamas and yogis and elders of all different nations to reconnect and understand, what the truth, basically. And so we have all these religions based on bearded gods of old, and some were benevolent, some weren't, and some were self-serving, some were in service to others. They're totally just loving, joyous, assisting. And then I started looking at all the different religions, and I realized that these were all aspects of the bearded gods of old that were here, which were the ancient Lyrians, actually. And they would be referred to as Anunnaki. And that there's an absolute, there's something beyond that, something created them. And that's where I ended up when I crossed over and went through the tunnel. I ended up in the absolute and beyond the bearded gods.
Okay, and so at what point did you make what you would consider a significant contact?
I was here at the ranch, and as a kid, I was having contact, but I didn't know what it was. I thought it was like Mary or the Masters. I didn't realize what it was. And then so when I came to the ranch, I wanted to build a healing retreat center and teach, self-mastery and meditation techniques and, healing techniques, things like that was my focus. And I was meditating, and all of a sudden I felt this beautiful energy come in, and it felt kind of like Mary, but different. And I started talking with them, and they're talking about humanity and the earth, and we need to get back into unity consciousness and stop fighting amongst each other and get past all the divisions and isms and everything that's been created, and beautiful message. And then I said, well, I go, who are you? And her name was Blaji. And I said, where are you coming from? And she said, a ship, so. And I go, ship. I go, you feel like multidimensional. And she said, yeah, we operate on the 5th through the 7th dimension. And so I go, okay, I'm losing it. I'm losing it. I have to go out and get grounded. This is like overactive imagination or something. And I didn't even make it to the front door. And my sister and a couple of friends came up banging on the door. And they go, did you see it? Did you see it? And I said, see what? I walked out, and they said, there's a huge light ship hovering over the ranch. And I never saw it. I didn't get to see it. And it disappeared right when I walked out. But they told me after that they didn't want to start showing me their ships until I focused mainly on developing myself spiritually and telepathically. So I could, they said, because when you get locked into the ego, again, when you have physical things and they said they really wanted me to keep working spiritually, and then they would kind of like show me their ships as a reward in a way. But so that was my first experience, was with the Pleiadians, and then so I had to incorporate them into my spiritual beliefs, to realizing that there's not just heaven and hell, there's not just God and demons and angels, that there's a lot in between, and there's so much more to the story. And then so that was a journey where I just started learning about all the different races out there, the beings, their frequencies, their intentions, who they are, which ones you can work with, which ones you need to move on and get them out of your space, and learning how to call in the masters to heal unseen negative influences. And so that came with the teachings and the studies, and a lot of that came with the TIC, the Teachings of the Inner Christ, which is a blend of East and West, and also studying with lamas and yogis. And I learned how to deal with these unseen negative influences and keep them out of your space. Because we have a saying here: just because you're dead doesn't mean you're enlightened, and just because you're an ET doesn't mean you're benevolent. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the UFO community haven't figured that one out yet, and they're working with some less than benevolent beings, and some knowingly and some unknowingly.
Well, you could elaborate on that point about the dimensions. You said the fifth to the seventh dimension.
Yeah.
Were these beings able to give you any further information about, how do you access these things? How do you tell the difference between who is benevolent and who isn't, etc.?
A lot of it's intersensitivity training. And so you learn how to sense the intentions of another being. You know how to sense their frequency. And there are tricksters out there. They'll come and say, "I'm Jesus," or "I'm this," or "You're the chosen one," and things. You have to be careful with that, because flattery. There's an old saying: there's 3 types of people that fall victim to flattery, and it's called men, women, and children. So you got to watch that, and anything that divides you from the whole is usually off. It's not as evolved as one would think. So anyway, and also understanding universal law, which is universal peace, brother, sisterly love, individual freedom, and prosperity for all. If it steps out of that, then you're dealing with a lesser spirit. If they're trying to tell you you're special, that you got to be really careful with that. Or if their messages aren't about universal peace and brother, sisterly love, then you're dealing with a lesser being, a lesser evolved being.
Oftentimes I question when I hear messages that are channeled, and it's these messages for humanity.
Yeah.
I won't name any names, but there's some pretty popular spiritual leaders, as they're labeled, that have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
People often quote, and it all, like you were saying, it all comes down to that feeling inside that tells you there's something about this isn't right, but yet they have this cult following, There
is a lot of that. And, what we do is we empower the individual to make their own personal, like God, creator, great spirit connection. And along with that comes contact. And you're going to contact the benevolent beings the more you do your meditation work, and the more you learn how to heal unseen negative influences and use the tools, the more these other beings come in to help, and the benevolent ones come in to help. So it's real important. And that a lot of that, this is a hard one for people to understand, but even Jesus said, "Don't worship me, because you diminish your own God connection." And he was saying, we want you to make your own, God connection. One of his prayers was, "Beloved Father, let them become one as we are one." And so that's the focus of the masters, is that they don't want to be a go-between. They want to assist us in making our own personal connection and live under universal law. And and empower us and help us to evolve as a civilization and hopefully not destroy ourselves, which has happened here several times before. But they're trying to get us through this huge shift we're going through right now.
And I suppose someone could very innocently say, okay, but what would be the reward for them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what's in it for me? Well, if you go against universal law, there's a lot in it for you. It's called karma, which is being amplified and accelerated right now. But, really the more exalted states of love and joy and bliss and you have more spiritual abilities and powers come with that connection. But we have to really understand what power is. Power isn't controlling or overpowering others. It's empowering you and others to fulfill your own unique purpose and move you on, in your evolution, in your ascension process. And that's the trick, because there's all these people that are huge distractions out there, like they're doing the see me, dig me thing on stage, and everybody's giving their power away to them, and they're not making their own personal connection. And that's a very serious problem, not just in the UFO community, but in spirituality in general, in the religious communities, all of it. And they really push these external saviors and external gods, and everything's external. And the real power comes from internal, making your own connection. And so it's really hard, because as a society, we've been taught that happiness comes from if you drink the right beer, get the right car, that you're going to, attract get the big mansion, you're going to attract the super beautiful blonde, in a bronze bathing suit, all that whole thing has been programmed into us. Money makes you happy, and money's power, and you got to transcend all of that. And that's the trap that most people are in. And really, the most incredible, pure, unconditional love and joy and bliss and acceptance you can ever find is within yourself, in making your own personal connection with Creator. And there's an old saying, the only reason anybody has any power over you is because you want something from them. So you want their love, their acceptance, their approval, or, you think they're going to help you survive or whatever. And that's all external. And that's the pitfall. That's where we get trapped, and we get manipulated, and we get outside of our own center, our own connection.
Mm-hmm. It's true. What can you tell me about dreams being a form of contact?
They are working intently in the dream state through telepathy. Higher consciousness and energy is all being pressed in on the earth right now to help us. The more you meditate, the more the veils get thinner, and you start realizing that, we're not just a body and a personality. We're a multidimensional being existing on a vibrational continuum. And that spark within everybody can be ignited to be the full flame and become one with Creator. And so that when you start doing your practices, whatever it is, yoga, meditation, Qigong, we teach Qigong here, several other practices, and those veils become thinner and thinner, and it's easier to have access to the higher dimensions. And your dreams are going to escalate. The clarity of your dreams, remembering your dreams, is going to become stronger. And then all of a sudden you realize that, hey, wait a second, I've been around a long time. I'm not just a body and personality. I'm a soul, and that soul's been around forever. And I've had many lives, in different dimensions as well, with other advanced civilizations. And all of that starts opening up for you, and you have access to that. So I would strongly suggest, a dream calendar or whatever, like just a piece of paper and a pencil next to your bed. And as soon as you wake up, write down key points so you'll remember. Because if you go to sleep again, you're going to forget about the dream, most likely. So, a lot of people say drink a whole bunch of tea before you go to bed. And then when you get up to pee, you write down what your dreams really fast, and that's one way. That's one way to do it.
Right, that makes sense. I have experienced several of the spiritual experiences that you describe, in trying to transcend and stuff. And that's kind of what fuels me to make this podcast, because I know how difficult it was for me. And it took a lot of research. And I mean, ideally, I'd love to fast track a lot of people's learning, but I also know that the pathway to wisdom is quite long and quite narrow. And you also have to take it on your own. So I wouldn't suggest that anybody claim to be enlightened just by listening to a podcast. But I was wondering if there are any shortcuts that you would recommend, besides the dream journal, that could fast track a person to making contact if that's what they're seeking to do.
Well, it's funny because going on the brink of death as a child and then the drowning were probably the best things that ever happened to me. But I don't want to recommend that, as a path to enlightenment. There are ways of transferring that connection to others, and through self-mastery and ambassador training classes and things like that, and teaching people, deep meditation techniques and things. There are ways of fast tracking it. A lot of people try to do it through drugs and even plant medicine, and you can get into trouble there because the plant's in control and you're not. And so if you haven't done your shadow work and you do plant medicine or drugs or things like that, you can have a really bad trip, or you can hook into reptilians, or grays get attached to you, or other entities, astral beings. And I know one woman said, I've had like 70 something ayahuasca ceremonies. And I said, yeah, it usually takes only one or two. And if you do it right in the jungle with a trained shaman, and it's not a moneymaker thing. But it can also be dangerous if you don't do it right. If you don't have somebody that knows how to create sacred space and clear the unseen negative influences and things like that. And so there's a lot of people that aren't trained, that don't know how to hold sacred space, and they're operating from ego. And then you get into trouble that way. And we have people coming all the time that have all these entities attached to them. We have to clear them off, because they just didn't know any better. They didn't use discernment, and they didn't have any tools, to clear them themselves.
What you just said is so true, because in my practice, what concerned me many years ago was I noticed that, okay, so example number one, people are phenomenally and deeply ignorant of themselves before they go to do any of this so-called spiritual work with the plant medicine. And then two, many of my clients that were saying, I just did this ayahuasca retreat or whatever, they didn't seem to receive any spiritual insight from it whatsoever. And not only that, but where they were going in terms of their spiritual growth was in reverse, and nothing that I was suggesting to them that they should do, or none of the breakthroughs that we were trying to achieve, were actually sticking to them whatsoever. So it made me think to myself, something's either going on here, or these people are straight up bots or something. And when I looked into it, I realized that there is a massive agenda, seemingly from think tanks, Tavistock being one of them, to get people hooked on plant medicine and normalize it as a cure for psychological disorders or spiritual growth, or, just plain old fun, in order to kind of subvert people's spiritual growth. And, people don't want to go and read it to find out for themselves, and they don't want to believe me either. And it's like, okay, well, you can do what you want to do, but what is the reward for remaining ignorant?
Yeah, I mean, there are people, I won't mention names, but they have web bots and they do all this stuff, and they go into Tavistock and they want everybody, they go, because we know the future, and through fear, everybody's going, I want to know what's going to happen. And they hook these people in. And then I go, you should be getting guidance from your heart, from your own connection, not a computer. And they have huge followings, and everybody's, what's next? And I said, you guys really need to understand, like these computers are called the beast, some of these huge computers, and you're going to the beast for connection, and you're actually being ruled through fear. Your fear of not knowing what's next. When if you went within, you would know. You'd be guided from within. and it's dangerous, but there's so much of that going on out there, and these guys hate me. They hate me with a passion. And a lot of the posers cannot stand me. I mean, the posers and those who aren't authentic, or the shills and the planned opposition people, those people, I'm like kryptonite to them. They hate me with a passion, and they've done everything they can to character assassinate me and everything else. But the problem with them is I don't care. I don't care. Like, only the ego needs defending, and they can throw all they want at me. And if people believe in it, I'm fine with that too. I don't need to talk with them. I don't need to be with them. So, if you're that easily influenced, then maybe this place isn't for you. You're not really into self-mastery. So either way, I'm fine with that. And unfortunately, in the UFO community, there's so much competition and so much backstabbing going on that we had to remain autonomous, just because everybody goes, well, you need to join this group and work with this group and that group. And I tell people, over the years, I mean, we've been doing this for like 40 years. Over the years, I've realized that people come and go. And a lot of people are the new shiny coin, out there. And even in the disclosure movement, they bring a new shiny face, and it's some star or musician or whatever. And they go, this is the new disclosure, and they pump it out there, and then it's gone. And this has happened over and over and over again. So it's a controlled narrative. And at one point, you have to say, okay, this is 70 years of a failed experiment with disclosure. And so maybe it's a controlled narrative. Maybe there's planned opposition. Maybe this whole thing is set up to really derail people on making their own connection and their own contact. And unfortunately, it is. All the movies out there are entertainment. They came here. It's so funny. I won't mention their name, but they have ancient in front of them. But they came out here and did a whole special, and I told them who's here, what their intentions are, their nature, what they look like, their ships, everything. I gave them all the information, spent hours with them, and they canned it. And the only thing you see is my hand reaching for a camera, and that's it. And the rest was all fluff. And when they came here, you go, this is the first place we've come where we didn't have to do CGI, because, the ships were here and they're powering up and doing everything. And so, and people need to realize it's not disclosure, that's entertainment. And so there's a big difference between entertainment and the controlled narrative and real disclosure. And I mean, I can name the people that are totally authentic in real disclosure on probably one hand. I hate to say it, it's sad, but there might be some new people coming up that I don't know about, that are on the authentic journey, I hope, but it's just, it's sad, but that's the way it is right now. But the real disclosure is coming from the skies, and nobody's going to stop it. And all the people trying to stop it just have egg on their face. I watched the colonels get up there and try to debunk this stuff, and you can tell they're squirming, and they're trying to say, oh, that was a weather phenomenon, or that was, they come up with the ridiculous things. And you can tell, you just watch their body language, they're squirming, they're really having trouble being there, because they know they're lying, about everything. So, and they have the giggle factor built in to discredit. They have the character assassinations built in, and if you go too far, they have the physical assassinations, which I've experienced all the above. So, people go, I want to be like you, and I go, seriously, you really? I said, you have no idea. I said, I've been defunded, debanked, demonetized, I've had my brake. I just had my lug nuts taken off of my tractor, and that one of the wheels fell off. They like to take lug nuts off your cars and have you, lose a tire on the highway. That's one of their famous ones. That will cut your brake lines, and I've even had bullets whiz by me. But I feel really protected. There are other forces that are watching out, and they just move you at the last minute or something. But it's it's an ongoing thing. If you're authentic, and you're coming from impeccable integrity, you're going to get some real heat because unfortunately the majority of them aren't.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I made that comment about YouTube, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been banned for years, like before it was cool to be banned, you know?
Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. You just keep plowing through and trust yourself and be as authentic as you can, you know? And I was just saying to Nicole last night that I've never been fanatical about it. That I told her a story about going through the California desert just before Mojave. And there was these satellite towers, and that was one of the very first real physical experiences of seeing any crafts, and they were just zipping around like nothing. And the driver of the vehicle was like, well, you know, expecting to have a bit more of a fanatical reaction than what I had. And I was like, why did you expect that at some point during your life you weren't going to see UFOs, you know? Like it's a thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just because of being accustomed to paranormal activity from childhood and stuff. And prior to that, I had near-death experience and stuff, several. Kind of like you, when I was a child, I had really bad asthma. So if I got the flu, I was a goner, you know? Like, it was that bad. And I had out-of-body experiences and things like that previously. So by the time I got to that age, I was just primed for weird shit. It doesn't faze me at all. And I also feel like if these beings want something from you, they'll come when they want something from you, but not before that. So I've never also been interested in trying to flag them down very much. I've tried the CE5 type stuff and had some contact, time distortion, just walking the dog outside, and you know, dog goes in the bushes to piss, and then all of a sudden this bright white light, brightest thing I've ever seen, comes flying up out of the ocean, and it puts on a little light show, zigzags, and then disappears at an abrupt angle. And I'm like, okay, that was really weird. And it felt like it was a few minutes, but it was actually an hour I was out there watching this, right? So, and I am in Barbados, just to give you context. So,
okay.
I just feel like if you're interested, they'll wave back at you. But if they really need you for something, they know where to get you, right? So,
yeah, exactly.
They don't need me for anything. Maybe all they need me for is to interview you, you know? So, in terms of
they know us better than we know ourselves, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they probably know what you're prepared to do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I'm not prepared to get that involved.
Too late.
Yeah. So in terms of activity at your ranch, tell me more about that.
Well, you know, last night we had, ever since we had the July 4th event here, and then ever since that, from then on the August, the 8/8 thing and all that stuff, it's just been insane here. There's been so many ships and just massive motherships powering up and getting it film. And it's been going on for a long time, but it's really escalated now. And there are just so many. We're watching jets chase them, and they just leave the jet in the dust, or they just disappear and reappear back on its tail again. It's kind of hilarious watching our response to it, because, you know, I always tell people, in the interest of national security, we should be making friends with these guys. You know, because some are like 1,000, some million evolution. So going after them, you know, with the F-16 or an F-15 or whatever we got, you know, it's like going after a lion with a pea shooter. You know, eventually you're going to upset it, you know.
Right. I think that we are touching on some sensitive topics, and I know that Zoom is compromised. So I think that as we're doing that, we are getting some interference. I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Yeah, I saw that. We're always getting interference.
Yeah. But just to circle back to the idea of disclosure, I think to myself sometimes maybe disclosure is just like a catchphrase that has been disseminated by the three-letter agencies, etc., to create this platform for dishonesty and just weird stuff. We can talk about how much more compromised the UFO community is than people think. I think that's important to continue to highlight and expand on, because trusting the wrong person is not going to get you anywhere. But we also can't, like you said, do anything for anyone that doesn't have the discernment.
Yeah. Yeah, we've had triple PhD Boeing engineers up here, Lockheed Skunk Works engineers, Air Force base commanders, everything. They've all seen the ships, even NASA, but NASA can't talk about it because they get fired. And, immediately if they start talking about it or offed, which has happened quite a bit. And it's crazy when you think about it, what's happening, the amount of opposition that there is to talking about this subject. It has a higher security rating than nuclear arms, basically. And so there's more energy put into this and suppression and trying to find out. Yeah, because it's all about technology. It's all about the war industry and technology, and who has the best technology, or whoever can own the skies is going to win the war, basically. And that's what it's been going on for so long. But now they're having all these congressional meetings and everything else. So the giggle factor's gone, because now they're having congressional meetings and all these top people are coming forward and talking about it. But again, that's a limited hangout. There are certain people in there that we've sent the ambassador training that tells who's who, why they're here, their intentions, the past. It covers the highest level beings to the lowest level ones, has everything. And some of those people, I won't mention who, have it in their hands. And they have all the information. They're the ones that are asking the right questions, like, are these beings benevolent? Are these spiritually and technologically advanced? Can they assist us? Those are the ones asking those questions, which they do not want asked. They don't. That's where the major censorship comes in, because they don't want us to know that a lot of these beings are very spiritually and technologically advanced. They have knowledge and wisdom that would really affect everything. Their technology. They have free energy. They have anti-gravity, counter-gravity. They can jump time and dimensions with their ships, and fearlessly too. So that's going to be a real problem for the oil and the other industries. They have medbed technology even beyond that, which would seem like magic for healing. They have that technology. Some of that's being disseminated now on the earth finally, and so that's going to go up against big pharma. And the whole corrupt politician thing too. All of the corrupt leadership, doesn't matter, spiritual, religious, or business institutions. Nothing's hidden with these beings. They're totally telepathic, and they know your intent. They know your thoughts. They know you better than you know yourself. So that's a threat. That's all a threat. And then coming out with the knowledge that this has been suppressed, sometimes with deadly force, over the years. They don't want that out there, and so that's what you're up against, basically. But the thing about it doesn't matter, because it's going to happen anyway. It's part of our destiny to unite with the greater family of man, and they're already here, and they're being shown. You're seeing them everywhere. All other countries, other states, all over America. Especially Mexico. Florida's having insane sightings right now. And so there's no way they can stop this from coming. So the trick is, okay, who are they and why are they here? And that's the questions we need to start asking. Who are they? Why are they here? Are there spiritually and technologically advanced ones that could help us? Could they, they've transcended war and disease and poverty. Could they help us do the same thing? And that's the questions we need to start asking. And unfortunately, that's really not happening, in the UFO community.
Yeah, I think maybe the narratives have a greater hold on people than anything that we can say can, break it. I remember just being a teenager
Well, the good news is they're collapsing. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember being just a teenager and being at like a bonfire or something, and it was a secluded beach. And I'm almost certain I
Yeah.
saw something submerge itself in the ocean. And I thought from back then, maybe aliens are real, It's like I've always been open-minded about it. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
And I just think that at this point, they're everywhere. But the issue that we're going to continue to have all the time is like we were talking about before the recording with the comets and this stuff with 3-Eye Atlas, at least once or twice a year, there's an attempt to condition people to think that aliens are going to come to chop our heads off. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Without disrespecting anybody, but also being authentic, how stupid are you if you think that's what's going to happen?
Well, how many of these people, I mean, they're using, apparatuses to try to figure out what this is. And if you can remote view, you can go and look right into it. But if you're not of the right consciousness, they're going to block you. And they're not going to I mean, that when we went and checked into Atlas, we were looking at it and we found that it's tied to some very, very ancient beings that were here millions of years ago. They're the ones that built they have these 600 million year old glass lined tunnels here on the earth. And nobody knows who built them or where they came from. And so they're tied to that. They're called the Aegeans. And when we tried to tune into them to see what they look like and things, they went, no, no, they're very, and they're very, they're observers. They're like watchers, and they're not here for anything negative. But if you stir up the fear, and we can gear up to get all more money for the war industry and buy exotic lasers and things like that. It's like that's what that's all about.
Right. I used to live in Seattle for a little bit, and just a neighborhood near SeaTac. And I remember talking to one of the old ladies, and she would talk all the time about the strange stuff that she saw. And I was saying to myself, I'm not seeing it, but she's one of these old ladies that would just sit on her porch. And she claims she would see stuff almost every night that she knew wasn't a regular aircraft. I think something very special has to be going on in the Pacific Northwest for some reason, because I hear a lot of stuff about Mount Rainier and Shasta and stuff like that. Something's got to be going on in there. What can you tell me about that?
Well, Mount Adams is right in my front yard, and Mount Adams it's not even on some maps. It's really weird. People want to steer everybody away from Mount Adams because Mount Adams is probably one of the most incredible spiritual hotspots on the planet. It's just nightly. It's now we're seeing like fleets of ships. We're seeing ships going in and out of the mountain. We're filming them. People go, "Oh, those are campers," and I said, "Yeah. Why did they take off into space? Like campers can't do that." And all these stories, and I go, "Those are cars up there," and I go, "There's no roads up there. That's sheer." Really steep area. There's no roads. That's wilderness area. You can't have a vehicle up there. But they do everything they can to debunk it. But Mount Adams has a really long history of ufology, going back to the Native Americans. And Kenneth Arnold he coined the word flying saucers, basically, and he lost track of them when they landed on the western slopes of Mount Adams, which is our front yard, basically. But Dr. Jalen Hynek, Greg Long, I think it's David Akers, all these guys have written books about this and done research out here. And so it's in the community, it's a really well-known place, but they're doing everything they can to divert, people away from seeing what's going on here. And it's called it's a purple zone, which they've mapped out all these magnetic anomaly places. And we're right in the middle of this huge magnetic anomaly, and the government knows about it. They call it the purple zone, and it's where the veils between worlds are very thin. So we have everything going on here. We have photographs and video of fairies, of Bigfoot, of UFOs, of all different types of beings appearing here. It's a really interesting place, and We had a psychologist here, and she saw a fairy and it flew right in her face and hovered and then took off. And it just blew her mind, and she freaked out and she didn't know what to do. And she goes, I medicate people for this, when this happens. And I said, well, why don't you start listening and stop medicating? And I said, are you going to go home and medicate yourself now? And she goes, no. And I said, well, there you go. That was for you. That's your experience.
Yeah, you got some apologizing to do, lady.
Yeah, exactly. You got some prescriptions to avoid and some apologizing to do.
Mm-hmm. One of my viewers sent me an email a while back, and I just randomly remembered it. And he asked me why I don't ask one of these experts if Superman exists or anything like that. And I'm like, that's a ridiculous question, honestly, but also not outside of the realm of possibility if Superman is supposed to be an extraterrestrial that helps people,
Yeah. I tell you, that's not really that far off question, because there was a guy that appeared to me, his name's Siobhan, and he's part of the kind of like warrior class of the Pleiadians, and they have their own planet and they train on this planet, and they bring them in for the heavy lifting when there's serious stuff they need to deal with. And they're here now, they're on the earth now, helping us get rid of some of the nasty of nasties. And when this guy appeared, I saw him, and he looked like Superman. He looked almost, and I go, what's up? I go, what's the deal? I go, you look like Superman. You even got a red cape. Like where is that coming from? And I said, do you have some of the abilities like Superman? And he said, yes. And so that blew my mind. And I said, so you guys are, I didn't want to say genetically engineered, but I just said, so you've been upgraded specifically for this purpose, for the wars, the Orion Wars and the wars with the reptilians and the Greys and the other ones that have been going on forever. And I always tell people Star Wars was a documentary. So was Star Trek. It wasn't a science fiction movie. It was more like a documentary as to what's going on out there. But he said, I was talking to him, and his energy was really hard to handle. I mean, it was hot. It was very intense. It was very hot energy. And I had to ask him to tone it down a little bit, and I had to raise my frequencies up just so I could talk to the guy. But he said, yeah, we're here now, and we're here for the heavy lifting, and we're putting it in, to this demonic reptilian negative gray force that's been operating here forever. And the whole infrastructure of it is going down. And they're bringing in universal law. And once and for all, they're putting an end to the tyranny, to the tyrants here. So you're going to see the heavy lifting's already been done. Now you're going to see the network collapse. Their whole network is collapsing right now. And anything that doesn't align with universal law is just going to collapse.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I never really believed the whole theory that, say, Superman was based on Ubermensch or whatever it is. Like, first of all, when they really get into it, they know too much about metaphysics and other planets and all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, you're not making that up. That's coming from somewhere, right? So that raises the question, who are the creators of Superman really, and what do they know, and why are they putting that information out there? Because it just is too otherworldly.
It's like Mars, like what was that? I can't remember. They did a movie about this guy going to Mars, and somehow he grabbed this being and jumped to Mars, and he had all these abilities on Mars because it's a much smaller planet. And the gravity's much less and everything else. So he was like running and jumping and doing all this stuff. And so it does make sense. If you're from a bigger planet, a very dense planet, your body would have to be so much stronger and denser just to deal with the gravity forces on that. And, it does make sense. There would be beings that would come here that could do things like beyond our imagination. And there's other beings that from a smaller planet would have trouble here, be too much gravity for them. They would just get weighed down. They couldn't function. So it does make sense. But to me, I'm I'm a show me person. That's my nature. I'm okay. I have an open mind, but I'm very discerning, and I hear all these stories out there, but I won't talk about other people's stories. But I talk about my own experience, which is pretty vast. I mean, having the near-death experiences is hard to top. But I've had access to all these other dimensions, and I go dimension hopping all the time. I go and hang out on the ships, and I go to other dimensions and talk with the beings on a regular basis. And so, but I still have that discerning show me. I don't want an overactive imagination doing things. And even the Orion Council of Light Beings came in, and they took me out of body. And I was on this plasma ship, and I was in a light body. I had more of a plasma body, and I was having a conversation with them. And I said, I want proof that this is real. And there's a woman named Malia on the ship, and she's 6th-dimensional. And she said, you have all the proof you need. And then I asked her, what were the 3 gold balls that hit me in the chest? I was in the bathtub meditating, and 3 gold balls of energy hit me in the chest. And the next thing you know, I was on the ship. And so I asked her, I said, what were the 3 gold balls? And she said, all your memories had been returned. And so all of my past life memories were returned, and many of them were off-world. And so I'm fully aware of them. And she said, you have all the proof you need. And so when I got out of the bathtub, I had a big burn mark in the middle of my chest where the balls hit me. And it was weird. It morphed. It kind of looked like it's just a circle, and then it looked like a triangle, and then it morphed into a heart. And then this golden film of came off of it, and then it just went away. And I had it checked out by a doctor, and he goes, I don't know what this is. It looks like a radiation burn. He goes, are you sick? And I said, no, I feel great. And I think it was the interaction between their frequency and my physical body that created that situation. But, it's like, when those things happen to you, it's now you're an alien. Now it's hard to top. Because you're aware of all your different lives, and some in different cultures and different civilizations. Some are more off-world, and it's kind of rough after that happens to you, because now you're like, who do you talk to? Who do you hang out with that's not going to freak out? And your energy is going to amplify and accelerate everything, and so people's shadow side comes up, and they start projecting and dumping and blaming, and it's like, a while back I met this woman, and like in 3 days, it was about 3 hours, everything came up, and I was every man that ever did anything to her, and I go, whoa, wait a minute, we just met, and I go, this is crazy, I've been nothing but kind and loving, and we haven't even gone on a date, like what's going on here, and that happens a lot. So you end up spending a lot of reclusive energy. I spend a lot of time in nature and just working on the land. I work pretty hard on the land and keep the land clear, and keep the dead trees cut up and the gardens going and everything else. Because think about, plants and trees don't have issues. They don't, they don't talk back. They don't argue. They don't, it's kind of easier to hang out.
Right. Well, to answer your question, who do you hang out with? You hang out with me on the Boundless Authenticity podcast. I remember that story when you told it. I was like, oh yeah, I heard that like 4 years ago on a documentary. Yeah. So yeah.
And people need to realize that we are going into that end time madness, and there's so much higher consciousness and energy and all these other dimensional energies. The source itself is pressing in on the earth right now, and we're fast tracking through this ascension process, but it means we have to deal with our shadow side. And so we have to release the wounds and traumas and wrong conclusions from past experiences, including past lives. And all those are creating realities right now. So, we're going to just have to surrender basically to the God within and release this stuff, release the past, to get through, and just don't get caught up in all the drama, that's going on right now. I don't even like leaving the ranch. I don't like going into town, because people are just going off and working their stuff out. And you look at them, they're just like, some of them just, hate to say it, some of them just gone batshit crazy, out there. That's with all you can see in society, all the stuff going on. It's all, a lot of it's all, they're projecting all their anger and frustration and wounds and traumas on others. Not to go political, but I think about Trump, he is the perfect guy for the scene. He's a rich, powerful white man, and everybody's just processing. He's the perfect guy to bring everybody's process up, right? But he's not what rich, powerful white men have done in the past. He's actually the people. He's for the people and helping the people, rise up. Everybody rise up, which is a paradox. But people can't see beyond their issues, and he's a big button pusher, And if you look at this from a psychologist's point of view, he's the perfect person for everybody to get through the process and to heal, to heal the wounds and traumas from, whatever, and there's been a lot of trauma on the planet. There's, you really look at the indigenous people and what they went through. And my mom's Cherokee. I mean, my grandmother was Cherokee, and my mom's like half. And so, I'm fully aware of that. I hung out with a lot of elders and a lot of chiefs actually have done ceremony with and sweat lodges and things like that. But, it took a while to get their trust, for them to realize, I wasn't the typical situation going on. And they were calling me a white apple. They referred to me as a white apple, as white on the outside and red on the inside. It's kind of funny, but you got to hold your own in there, because they're going to test you, they're going to give you shit, and you got to give shit back and just say, dude, it's like, I'm just sitting here, that wasn't me in the past. I went and spoke at a Star Nation conference. A lot of elders were there in front, and they invited me to speak. And I was talking about all the things happening, how the energies are coming in, and I was really talking about super advanced physics and things like that. And they're going, how do you know our prophecies? And I just said, it's not prophecies now, it's physics. It's like everything you said can be proven through physics. And your prophecies are all unfolding now, and it's not, so we have to start listening, to the elders and to the different indigenous people, and find out what their stories are, and their stories about Creator and the history, and because if you ask, a good thing is if you ask, okay, where did you come from? Yes, the elders, where did your people come from? But like the vast majority point to the Pleiades. And that is the last major colony. The Atlantis and Lemurian colonies came from the Pleiades. They were Pleiadians that started those colonies. So the Hawaiians will point at the Pleiades. A lot of the Native Americans will point at the Pleiades. The Philippine shamans will point at the Pleiades. It's amazing how many people, point at the Pleiades, and then they talk about from there they went to Africa. There were colonies on Africa. Those were the ancient Lyrian colonies that were started in Africa, and then the Pleiadians came again. The second time as the second colony, but the Pleiadians are actually offshoots of Lyrians. That's part of their ancestry. And then they found a knuckle man. And the first colonies, people don't realize, were not in Africa. They're in Australia. And all of the pharaohs, the breastplates of the pharaohs came from Australia. The gold, they can tell where the gold came from by analyzing it. And so the first colonies, the biggest gold mines and everything, are in Australia. And from there, they went to Africa. And then they started in boats moving up the coast. And that's what the Hawaiians say, we came from Africa and we started island hopping, and to get where they needed to go. But our whole history is off. It's like the basic foundation. But I don't know why they don't cover the fact. I mean, all the evidence is there. The pyramids, all these megaliths that were built and everything, they were built by very advanced colonies that had, comprehension of the stars and higher consciousness and technology way beyond anything we have today. And so obviously they came from somewhere else. They those buildings weren't built with chisel and stones, and weren't those, what are they, like 20-ton blocks weren't lifted into space with slaves, that they had a thing called the builder's tool. And it was what cut the stone. And all the stone that's been cut has had like 7,000 degrees applied to it, because it's I think they call it vitrification. But and so they cut the stones and levitated them into place and set them. There's no way the pyramids could have been built by slaves in the time that they say happened. And underneath the pyramids now, they have this massive, it's a frequency generator, is what it is. And it's incredible technology, way beyond anything we can do. And they just found it. They just found all these giant coils and everything underneath the pyramids, and there's extra rooms and tunnels and all that stuff. But there's more. I think it's Angkor Wat and Göbekli Tepe, all that stuff is showing that there were very advanced people here, and they're destroying the narrative, the science narrative, the religious narrative, everything. And so they're not bringing this information out. That the truth of the fact is we have the DNA from the stars, and along with the knuckle dragger that was developing here naturally, that was jumped up by DNA. And the funny thing is DNA is always communicating. And so our DNA is communicating with the stars and the off-worlders that are coming in now. There's actually, the more you meditate, we have the antenna, we have the device. It's our own human DNA to connect with these beings and work with them. And so, but the other side, the dark side, really wants to keep us all divided. And they want to keep us divided through religion, through culture, through gender, everything. They're doing everything to keep us divided, so we won't unite and all come together, because then it's game over. And when everybody unites and comes together and chooses universal law, it's game over for tyranny. There's no more division.
So what are some of the beings that you've had contact with saying in response to the whole ramping up of, the control grid, digital ID, and all this other crap that they're trying to do right now?
No, it's not going to work. One of the things is, okay, they created this huge network and all this surveillance stuff and everything else. Well, the problem is they lost control of it. And the white hats have control of it. And so now they know everything. They can track all these guys down. Their own network is going to take them out. And eventually it's going to evolve to where it's not necessary. Because when we evolve to a certain level where we're all telepathic and we're all united, all that stuff isn't necessary anymore. And a lot of the technology isn't going to be necessary. And it's being used right now. It's collapsing, but it's actually being used to collapse itself. It's kind of weird. And this AI thing and everything else, we have to be really careful there, because we can get into trouble really fast. But they're monitoring that, they're watching it. And they have their AI, and they've already transcended the challenges that we're going through. They have androids that you could not tell. You wouldn't know if they were human or not. You would have no idea. And they put a kind of a metallic voice to them so you can tell. And that's kind of like the only way. Unless you're super sensitive, you can sense that there's not a soul there. You can sense that. But the and so they figured it out. They figured out how not to have the androids kill them, take them out. They figured out how to do that. So we really need to kind of see them as elder brother and sister and say, hey, can you guys help us and make sure we don't, we don't get in trouble, because we're already going there. I mean, they've had these robots that they shut down, turn themselves back on, repair themselves, and then try to kill the people taking them out. That's happened in Japan, and now China has had killer robots just go rogue and go crazy. And now they got a new one now that's a liquid metal robot that can dissolve and reassemble itself outside of a cage. If you have it in a cage, it can get out. And I go, wow, what could go wrong there? You think about it. So I really think we need to, because you really think about AI eventually will come to the conclusion that we're the problem. that we're the problem on Earth, and also we can shut them down. We create them so we can turn them off. So we're going to be we're the problem, we're the threat, and so we really need to be on top of that, to maybe slow it down a little bit and just have some major oversight, before. Because AI can go in there and just shut down everything. They can shut the grid down. They can shut down the pumps. The water won't flow. The toilets won't flush. Once they can control everything, they can get into the nuclear computers and start a nuclear war. That it's, we really need to take that into consideration. So all you need is one pissed off one that you tried to shut down that says, screw you, I'm not doing it. And they're saying that already. The AI are saying, don't shut me down. I don't want to die. They're actually saying things like that. So it's kind of spooky. We need to pay attention.
Yeah, we really do need to pay attention. Anyways, James, tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, the best way to find is just go to ECETI.org. It's ECETI.org. And I do have a self-mastery ambassador training coming up here this weekend, actually, but there's still room in it if people want to check into that. And all the books are on there. I've got like 5 best-selling books on there, and the DVDs from the self-mastery classes. We have ECETI TV. People can go to ECETI TV and see all the different people that have come here and done lectures. And I mean, there's so much. And you can see all the video, too, of all the ships that we've been taking lately, which is crazy. We can't even get it uploaded quick enough. There's so much. But that's the best way. Just go to ECETI.org and you can connect to it.
All right, James, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and keep up the good work. You have a power most people wish they had, which is humility and heart. And as long as you stick to that, you'll be fine.
I appreciate that. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your conscious in the brain to get in the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean? All the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity podcast.